The shrill ring of the telephone pierced the quiet of our kitchen, startling me as I stood at the sink, elbow deep in soapy water. I quickly dried my hands and answered, my heart skipping a beat when I heard my father's voice on the other end. "Miranda, honey, I need you at the office right away. There's been a situation." I glanced at the clock. It was barely 7 a.m. "Dad, what's going on? Is everything okay?" "Just come as soon as you can," he said, his voice tight with worry. "And don't tell Eric." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, my mind racing. What could be so urgent? And why didn't he want me to tell Eric? As if on cue, my husband's voice called from upstairs. "Miranda." "Who was that?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Just a wrong number, honey," I called back, hating the lie even as it left my lips. "I'm heading out early to pick up some groceries before work." "All right," Eric replied, his voice muffled through the bedroom door. "Don't forget we have dinner with my parents tonight." "I won't," I assured him, grabbing my purse and car keys. As I slipped out the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The drive to my father's manufacturing company seemed to take forever, even though it was only a few miles away. When I finally pulled into the parking lot, I saw my father's car and one other. James, Dad's right-hand man, must already be here too. I hurried inside, my heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "Dad?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty reception area. "In here, Miranda," came his reply from his office. I pushed open the door to find my father slumped in his chair, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. James stood nearby, his face grim. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between them. My father sighed heavily. "Sit down, sweetheart, we've got a problem." I sank into the chair across from him, my stomach churning with anxiety. "Dad, you're scaring me. What is it?" He pushed a stack of papers across the desk towards me. "These arrived by courier this morning. It's a buyout offer from Harper Industries." I felt the blood drain from my face. Harper Industries, Eric's family's company. The same company he'd been trying to get me to leave Dad's business for years. "But how?" I stammered, flipping through the documents. "We're not for sale." James spoke up, his voice tight with anger. "Someone's been feeding them inside information. Financial records, client lists, everything they'd need to make a targeted offer." I looked up at him, shocked. "You think we have a mole?" My father nodded grimly. "It looks that way. And Miranda, there's something else you need to know." He hesitated, and I felt my heart drop. "What is it, Dad?" "The offer, it's signed by Eric Harper." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to steady myself. That's impossible. Eric wouldn't, he couldn't. But even as I said the words, a sickening realization began to dawn. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the constant pressure for me to leave my father's company, it all suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. "I'm so sorry, honey," my father said softly, reaching across the desk to take my hand. "I know this must be a shock." I pulled my hand away, standing up abruptly. "I need to go," I said, my voice sounding distant and hollow to my own ears. "I need to talk to Eric." As I turned to leave, James called out, "Miranda, wait. There's more you need to know." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. What else could there possibly be? James and my father exchanged a look, and I felt my world crumble a little more. Whatever they were about to tell me, I knew my life would never be the same. I stormed into our house, my mind reeling from what James and Dad had just told me. Eric's betrayal ran deeper than I could have imagined. Not only was he trying to buy out my father's company, but he had been manipulating employees and cooking the books to make it happen. "Eric!" I shouted, slamming the front door behind me. "Where are you?" He appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of innocence. "Miranda? What's wrong? I thought you were getting groceries." I glared at him, my hands shaking with anger. "Drop the act, Eric. I know everything." He descended the stairs slowly, his brow furrowed in feigned confusion. "What are you talking about?" "The buyout offer," I spat. "The insider information. The manipulation of Dad's employees. How could you?" Eric's face hardened, all pretense of innocence vanishing. "How could I? How could I try to save you from that dead-end company? How could I try to give our family a better future?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A better future by destroying my father's life's work? Your father's company is a sinking ship, Miranda, Eric said, his voice cold. I was trying to throw you a lifeline. By lying to me, by going behind my back, I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. We're supposed to be partners, Eric. A team. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Partners? When have you ever acted like we were partners? You've always put your father's company first, even when I offered you a chance at something better. Something better? I echoed incredulously. You mean working for your family's soulless corporation? No, thank you. Eric's face twisted with anger. Don't you dare insult my family's business. At least we know how to run a successful company, unlike your father. I felt like I'd been slapped. My father built that company from nothing. He treats his employees like family. And that's exactly why it's failing, Eric sneered. Business isn't about family, Miranda. It's about profit. I stared at him, suddenly seeing him clearly for the first time. This wasn't the man I had married. This was a stranger, cold and calculating. What happened to you, Eric? I asked softly. When did you become this person? He rolled his eyes. I've always been this person, Miranda. You've just been too naive to see it. A terrible thought struck me. Does Samuel know about any of this? Eric's expression flickered for a moment. Of course not. He's just a kid. A kid who idolizes his father, I said, my voice breaking. What am I supposed to tell him? You don't tell him anything, Eric snapped. This is between us. I shook my head, backing away from him. No, Eric. This affects our whole family, including Samuel. Just then we heard the front door open. Mom? Dad? I'm home. Eric and I froze, staring at each other. Samuel's footsteps approached the living room. Hey, what's going on? Our son asked, looking between us with confusion. Why are you guys yelling? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I explain this to our child? Eric stepped forward, plastering on a smile. It's nothing, champ. Just a little disagreement about work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. I watched as Samuel's face relaxed, accepting his father's explanation without question. The trust in his eyes broke my heart. Actually, Samuel, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, your father and I need to have a serious talk with you. Eric's head snapped towards me, his eyes flashing with anger and panic. Miranda, don't. But I stood my ground. Our son deserved the truth, no matter how painful. As I looked at Samuel's confused face, I knew that whatever happened next would change our family forever. The days following our confrontation with Samuel were a blur of tension and unspoken words. Eric had managed to downplay the situation, painting it as a simple business disagreement. But the damage was done. Samuel's eyes now held a flicker of doubt when he looked at his father, and the strain between Eric and me was palpable. I threw myself into work at Dad's company, determined to find a way to save it from Eric's ruthless takeover attempt. But every day brought new challenges. One morning, I arrived at the office to find Dad hunched over his desk, his face ashen. Miranda, we've lost the Johnsons' contract, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt my heart sink. The Johnsons were our biggest clients. How? Why? Dad shook his head. They said they got a better offer from Harper Industries. The pieces clicked into place. Eric, I growled. He's using the information he stole to poach our clients. I spent the rest of the day making frantic calls, trying to salvage what I could. But everywhere I turned, I found Eric's fingerprints. Clients we'd had for years were suddenly jumping ship, lured by promises of better deals from Harper Industries. When I got home that evening, exhausted and defeated, I found Eric in the kitchen, whistling cheerfully as he cooked dinner. Rough day? He asked, his tone mockingly sympathetic. I slammed my bag down on the counter. How dare you? The Johnsons? Really, Eric? He shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. It's just business, Miranda. Maybe if your father knew how to run a company properly, he wouldn't be losing clients. This isn't business, I hissed. This is sabotage. Eric's eyes hardened. I told you I'm trying to save you from that sinking ship. If you just quit and come work for me. Never, I cut him off. I will never work for your family's company, not after this. He sighed dramatically. Then I guess I'll just have to keep showing you how hopeless your father's company is, until you see reason. I stared at him, unable to recognize the man before me. When did you become so cruel? Cruel. He laughed. I'm being kind, Miranda. I'm trying to secure our future, our son's future. At the mention of Samuel, I felt a fresh wave of anger. Don't you dare use our son as an excuse for your actions. Eric's face darkened. Speaking of Samuel, I don't appreciate you trying to turn him against me the other day. I was telling him the truth, I shot back. Something you seem incapable of doing. The truth? Eric sneered. The truth is, you're so blinded by loyalty to your father that you can't see what's best for our family. I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. No, Eric, what's best for our family is honesty and integrity. Two things you clearly know nothing about. His hand slammed down on the counter, making me jump. Enough. I've had it with your self-righteous attitude. From now on, you stay out of my business dealings. And if you try to turn Samuel against me again, there will be consequences. The threat hung in the air between us. I stared at Eric, seeing a stranger where my husband used to be. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over, but I also knew that leaving wouldn't be easy. Eric wouldn't let go without a fight. As if reading my thoughts, Eric's lips curled into a cold smile. Oh, and Miranda? Don't even think about leaving. Remember, I have friends in high places now. It would be a shame if something happened to your father's company, or to your father himself. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was war. And I was terrifyingly outgunned. Eric's threat echoed in my mind as I drove to his parents' house. I knew it was risky, but I had to talk to Thomas and Susan. Maybe they could talk some sense into their son, or at least shed some light on his sudden change in behavior. As I pulled into their driveway, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Susan answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. Miranda, what a lovely surprise. Come in, dear. I followed her into the living room, where Thomas was reading the newspaper. He looked up, his brow furrowing at my expression. Miranda? Is everything all right? I sank into an armchair, feeling the weight of the past few weeks crashing down on me. No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything is very much not all right. Over the next hour, I poured out the whole story, Eric's betrayal, his attempts to sabotage my father's company, and his recent threats. Thomas and Susan listened in stunned silence, their faces growing more horrified with each revelation. When I finished, Susan reached out and took my hand. Oh, Miranda, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. We had no idea Eric was capable of such cruelty, Thomas finished, his face grim. This isn't the son we raised. I felt a glimmer of hope. Then you believe me? You'll help? Thomas and Susan exchanged a look, and my heart sank. We believe you, Miranda, Thomas said slowly. But Eric is still our son. We can't just... Can't just what? I asked, my voice rising. Can't stop him from destroying my family? From threatening my father? Susan squeezed my hand. We'll talk to him, Miranda. We'll try to make him see reason. I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry. Reason? Eric is way past reason. He needs to be stopped. Thomas leaned forward, his expression serious. Miranda, think carefully about what you're asking. If we go against Eric, it could tear this family apart. I stood up, my hands clenched at my sides. This family is already torn apart, Thomas. Eric made sure of that when he decided to betray everything we've built together. As I turned to leave, Susan called out, Wait, there's something you should know. I paused at the door, looking back at them. Susan glanced at Thomas, who nodded grimly. Eric, he's been under a lot of pressure at work, Susan said hesitantly. His father's been pushing him to take over the company, to prove himself. Thomas sighed heavily. I may have encouraged him to be more aggressive in his business dealings, to show he has what it takes to lead. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So this is your fault? You pushed Eric to become this monster? We never meant for it to go this far, Thomas said, his voice pleading. We just wanted him to succeed. I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. Well, congratulations. Your son is succeeding at destroying everything and everyone around him. As I walked out, leaving Thomas and Susan calling after me, I realized I was truly alone in this fight. Eric's parents might not approve of his actions, but they wouldn't actively stand against him either. Driving home, I made a decision. If I was going to save my father's company and protect my family, I would have to do it on my own, no matter the cost. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Eric's car was already there. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. As I walked into the house, I heard Eric's voice from the kitchen. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his tone cold and accusatory. I squared my shoulders, ready for battle. "I think it's time we had a real talk, Eric, about our future and about divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. I had just thrown down the gauntlet, and there was no going back now. The word divorce hung in the air between Eric and me, heavy and final. His face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't be serious," he snarled, taking a step towards me. I stood my ground. "I've never been more serious in my life, Eric. This ends now." Before he could respond, my phone rang. It was James from the office. "Miranda, you need to get down here right away. There's something you need to see." The urgency in his voice made me forget about Eric for a moment. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my keys. Eric blocked the door. "Where do you think you're going? We're not done here." I met his gaze unflinching. "Move, Eric, or I'll move you myself." Something in my tone must have convinced him because he stepped aside. As I drove to the office, my mind raced. What could be so important? I found James and my father in the conference room, huddled over a stack of papers. They both looked up as I entered, their faces grim. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart pounding. Dad pushed a document towards me. "We found this in the new intern's desk. Benjamin, I think his name is." I scanned the paper, my blood running cold. It was a detailed report on our company's weaknesses, clearly intended for Harper Industries. But what shocked me most was the signature at the bottom, Eric's. "There's more," James said softly, handing me another file. As I read through it, I felt sick. It was a series of emails between Eric and various employees, including Benjamin. Eric had been systematically manipulating them, promising promotions and bonuses in exchange for insider information. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Months," Dad replied, his face etched with pain. "Maybe longer. Miranda, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I shook my head, trying to process it all. "It's not your fault, Dad. None of us saw this coming." Just then, Benjamin burst into the room, his face pale. "Miss Harper, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize." I held up a hand to stop him. "Slow down, Benjamin. What are you talking about?" He took a deep breath. "Mr. Harper, Eric, he told me it was just a routine audit. I didn't know I was helping him sabotage the company. And then when I figured it out and tried to back out, he threatened me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Threatened you, how?" Benjamin looked down, his voice barely audible. "He said he'd make sure I never worked in this industry again, that he'd ruin my life if I didn't cooperate." The room fell silent as we all absorbed this new information. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity for Benjamin. He was just another victim of Eric's ruthless ambition. "Thank you for coming forward, Benjamin," I said finally. "We'll need you to write all this down, officially." As Benjamin nodded and left with James to give his statement, I turned to my father. "Dad, I think it's time we fought back." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "Miranda, are you sure? This could get ugly. Eric won't go down without a fight." I squared my shoulders, feeling a newfound determination. "I'm sure, Dad. We have the truth on our side, and I'm done letting Eric bully and manipulate everyone around him." As I said the words, I knew I was crossing a line. This wasn't just about saving the company anymore. It was about exposing Eric for who he really was, no matter the cost. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad. "I'm calling a lawyer," I said, my voice steady, "and then I'm going to contact every employee Eric's tried to manipulate. It's time we brought everything into the light." As I dialed the number, I knew there was no turning back. The war had begun, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I worked tirelessly with James, Benjamin, and a private investigator named Sarah to uncover every shred of evidence against Eric. Each day brought new revelations, each more shocking than the last. "Miranda, you need to see this," Sarah said one afternoon, her voice tense as she handed me a file. I opened it, my heart sinking as I saw a series of photos. They showed Eric with a young woman I recognized as Allison, an intern at Harper Industries. The images left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "There's more," Sarah continued, her expression grim. "We've uncovered financial records showing Eric has been embezzling funds from both companies." I felt the room spin. "Both companies?" Sarah nodded. Your father's and Harper Industries. He's been playing both sides, Miranda. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Eric wasn't just trying to take over my father's company, he was setting himself up to control both businesses. The scale of his deception was staggering. As I processed this information, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Samuel. "Mom, where are you?" "Dad's acting weird. I'm scared." My blood ran cold. I had been so focused on gathering evidence that I'd left Samuel alone with Eric. What if he suspected what I was doing? "I have to go," I said, grabbing my keys. "My son needs me." I raced home, my mind conjuring worst-case scenarios. When I burst through the door, I found Samuel huddled on the couch, his eyes wide with fear. "Mom," he cried, running into my arms. "Where's your father?" I asked, scanning the room. "He left," Samuel whispered. "But not before he trashed your studio." My heart sank as I walked into my art studio. Canvases were slashed, paint spilled across the floor, and my easel lay in splinters. Among the wreckage, I found a note in Eric's handwriting. "This is your last warning. Back off, or next time it won't be your paintings I destroy." Rage boiled inside me. How dare he threaten me? How dare he scare our son? I turned to Samuel, trying to keep my voice calm. "Pack a bag, sweetie. We're going to stay with Grandpa and Grandma for a while." As Samuel went to his room, I called my father. "Dad, I need your help. Eric's gone too far." "What happened?" he asked, alarm evident in his voice. I quickly explained the situation. "We need to move fast," I concluded. "Eric knows we're onto him. He's getting desperate." "Come over right away," Dad said. "We'll figure this out together." As I helped Samuel pack, my phone rang again. It was James, his voice urgent. "Miranda, you need to get to the office now. Eric's here, and he's destroying everything." I felt my world tilting on its axis. Eric was making his final move, and I had to choose. Protect my son or save my father's company. "James, call the police," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm on my way." I turned to Samuel, my heart breaking. "Change of plans, honey. We're going to the office. Stay close to me, okay?" As we drove through the night, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Everything I cared about was at stake, my son, my father's legacy, my own future, and it all hinged on what would happen when I confronted Eric. I pulled into the office parking lot, seeing police lights flashing in the distance. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Samuel. "Stay in the car and lock the doors. If anything happens, call Grandpa." As I stepped out of the car, I saw Eric through the office windows, tearing through files and smashing computers. This was it, the moment of truth. With a silent prayer, I walked towards the building, ready to face whatever came next. I burst through the office doors, my heart pounding in my ears. The scene before me was chaos, papers strewn everywhere, broken glass crunching under my feet. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Eric, his face contorted with rage. "Eric, stop!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the destroyed office. He whirled to face me, his eyes wild. "You!" he snarled. "You did this! You ruined everything." I stood my ground, forcing my voice to remain steady. "No, Eric, you did this, all of it, and it ends now." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Ends? Oh, Miranda, you have no idea. This is just the beginning." I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the screen. "I have everything, Eric. The embezzlement, the manipulation, your affair with Allison. It's over." For a moment, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. "You're bluffing," he said, taking a step towards me. "Am I?" I pressed play on my phone, and Benjamin's voice filled the room, detailing Eric's threats and manipulations. Eric lunged for the phone, but I was quicker, stepping back. "That's just the start," I said. "I have financial records, witness statements, everything. You're finished, Eric." He stopped, his breathing heavy. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "Think about Samuel. Think about our family." "I am thinking about Samuel," I shot back. "That's why I'm doing this. He deserves better than a father who lies, cheats, and threatens people." Eric's face twisted with fury. "You bitch!" he roared, lunging at me again. Suddenly, James was there, stepping between us. "That's enough, Eric," he said firmly. Eric stumbled back, looking around wildly. It was then that I noticed the police officers entering the room, led by my father. "Eric Harper," one of the officers said, "you're under arrest for embezzlement, corporate espionage, and destruction of property." As they read him his rights, Eric's eyes locked onto mine. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll regret this, Miranda. I swear you will." I watched as they led him away, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over, but at what cost? My father approached, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Miranda," he said softly. "It's over." I shook my head, tears welling in my Dad, "It's not over. It's just beginning." Just then my phone rang. It was Samuel. "Mom," his voice was small and scared. "There are people outside the car. They're trying to get in." My blood ran cold. "Samuel, listen to me," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Lock the doors and stay down. I'm coming right now." I turned to my father and James, my heart racing. "Eric's not working alone," I said. "They're after Samuel." We raced out of the building, the police right behind us. As we reached the parking lot, I saw two men in dark clothes trying to force open my car door. Samuel was huddled in the back seat, his eyes wide with terror. "Police, freeze!" an officer shouted. The men looked up, startled. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then chaos erupted. One man made a break for it, while the other pulled out a gun. Shots rang out, and I found myself on the ground, my father's body shielding me. When I looked up, both men were in custody, and Samuel was safe, sobbing in a police officer's arms. I rushed to him, pulling him close. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, my own tears falling. "It's over now. We're safe." As I held my son, surrounded by the wreckage of my old life, I knew that this was both an ending and a beginning. We had survived Eric's betrayal, but the real challenge lay ahead, rebuilding our lives from the ashes he had left behind. I looked at my father, at James, at the officers who had come to our aid. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "All of you." In that moment, I made a silent vow. We would recover from this. We would rebuild, and we would be stronger than ever. The courtroom was packed as I took the stand, my heart pounding. Eric sat at the defense table, his face a mask of cold indifference. As I recounted the months of manipulation, threats, and betrayal, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was it, the moment of truth. "And Mrs. Harper," the prosecutor asked, "what made you finally decide to come forward?" I looked directly at Eric as I answered. "When I realized that his actions weren't just hurting me, but everyone around us, our son, our employees, even his own parents. I couldn't stand by and watch him destroy more lives." Eric's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive wife, but the evidence spoke for itself. Financial records, witness testimonies, even Eric's own emails, it all pointed to his guilt. When the jury returned with their verdict, I held my breath. "We find the defendant, Eric Harper, guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted, but I barely heard it. I locked eyes with Eric one last time as they led him away. In that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Defeat. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. My father stepped forward, shielding me and Samuel. "My daughter has been through enough," he said firmly. "We have no further comment." As we drove home, Samuel spoke up from the back seat. "Mom, is it really over now?" I reached back and squeezed his hand. "Yes, honey, it's over. We can start fresh now." The next few months were a whirlwind of change. With Eric in prison, I threw myself into rebuilding my father's company. It wasn't easy. Many clients had been scared off by the scandal, but slowly we began to recover. One evening, as I sat in my newly repaired art studio, staring at a blank canvas, I heard a knock at the door. It was James. "Miranda," he said, a smile playing at his lips, "you need to see this." He handed me a tablet, showing me the company's latest financial reports. We were not only back on track, but thriving. "We did it," I breathed, hardly believing my eyes. James shook his head. "No, Miranda, you did it. Your strength, your determination, that's what saved this company." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. For the first time in months, they were tears of joy. The next day, I called a company-wide meeting. As I stood before our employees, faces that had become like family over the past months, I felt a surge of pride. "We've been through a lot," I began, my voice steady, "but we've come out stronger. Each one of you played a part in rebuilding this company, and I couldn't be more grateful." I paused, looking around the room. "But we're not just rebuilding a company. We're rebuilding trust, integrity, and community. These are the values my father founded this company on, and they're the values that will guide us forward." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had done it. We had survived. That night, as I tucked Samuel into bed, he asked, "Mom, are you happy now?" I smiled, realizing the truth of my answer. "Yes, sweetheart." I am. Later, sitting in my studio, I picked up a paintbrush for the first time in months. As I began to paint, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The canvas before me was blank, just like our future. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what picture would emerge. As I painted late into the night, I reflected on the journey we'd been through. Eric's betrayal had nearly destroyed us, but it had also revealed a strength I never knew I had. We had faced the storm and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I was ready for them. Because now I knew the truth. I was stronger than any obstacle, any betrayal. And with my family, my friends, and my own resilience, there was nothing we couldn't overcome. As the first light of dawn broke through my studio window, I stepped back and looked at my finished painting. It was a portrait of Samuel and me, surrounded by the people who had stood by us, my parents, James, even Benjamin. Behind us stood the company building, bathed in sunlight. It wasn't just a painting. It was a promise of new beginnings, of hope, and of the unbreakable bonds that had seen us through our darkest hour. I smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. We had weathered the storm, and now, finally, we were home.